Hello there, my name is Helen McGrath and I'm a statistician working on the Sexual Violence Survey. In this presentation I'm going to highlight some key points from the latest publication from the Sexual Violence Survey. This publication, the Sexual Violence Survey 2022 Adult Experiences, will focus on sexual violence experiences that are being experienced as an adult only. And this is broken down by whether this was a partner or a non-partner. Also providing a wider range of socio-demographic characteristics for the overall prevalence levels, and will also contain some additional details on the experience. For example, the age the person was when the sexual violence experience first began, the occurrence of that experience, and the location of that experience for non-partner experiences only. So this information comes from the Sexual Violence Survey, and this was a very complex and challenging survey which involved the collection of some very detailed, sensitive information from respondents. And it involved, in many cases, respondents recounting difficult and painful experiences of sexual violence. So we want to thank all of the participants in the survey for sharing their story with the CSO. In this presentation, I'm going to describe the background to the survey, including some definitions and concepts. I'm then going to present some of the results from the publication. I'm going to outline the publication plan for the remaining publications, and then I'm going to conclude with some final remarks. So the main starting point for this project was a report of the Scoping Group on Sexual Violence Data, which was published in 2018. They recommended that a comprehensive national survey on the prevalence of sexual violence with a substantial number of participants should be undertaken. It's been 20 years since the last data for Ireland has been published, and there is a strong societal and policy interest in knowing more about the prevalence levels of sexual violence in Ireland. This publication is part of our suite of official statistics published by the Office, and this survey has been embedded in our work plan to be repeated in 10 years' time. Some key observations just to be made aware of. So surveys on sexual violence only are few. Questions are often included in other countries' surveys, for example, surveys on crime or on health. And being aware of how these questions are introduced is important when you're looking at the eventual data. This is clearly a very sensitive topic, and the underreporting risk has to be managed very carefully throughout the survey. You must be careful in how you ask questions on this very sensitive topic to ensure you're getting a true reflection of the levels of sexual violence. Research shows that society's awareness of violence can impact on the reported or disclosed levels of violence in society. It would be completely natural to want to compare data from this publication to other data from other countries, and we would strongly caution against that. There are a wide range of methodological reasons as to why the data cannot be compared between countries, and not only that, the differing levels of society's awareness of violence within their country can change both across time and between countries. The CSO appreciates that the data in today's publication represents a wide range of individual stories, which speaks to the lived experience of those who both have and have not experienced sexual violence. So I'm just going to give you a brief summary of the data collection process. So this is a prevalence survey, not an incidence survey. So we are trying to capture the overall levels of sexual violence in Ireland. This is not an exhaustive list of each incident that the person experienced in their lifetime. And this is particularly important to be aware of as we move into the detailed section on data. This is based on a nationally representative sample. So this was collected from using a random sample of mix of ages and sex across all areas of Ireland, with no prior knowledge of anyone's background or life experience. This is an individual-based survey, so this was asked directly of respondents and asked of those aged 18 and over. So we asked this survey in three modes, or in three approaches. So we offered it online, on self-completion on a tablet, which was facilitated by the interviewer but without the interviewer present while the answers were being submitted, and a paper survey. But the one thread that weaves these three modes together is self-completion. So this allowed the creation of a private space in order that the person could share this very sensitive information to us. And overall we got 4,500 responses to the survey. So I'm just going to touch on some concepts being used in the sexual violence survey. So the consent principle is what we use to gather people's experiences. So this is where something happened with or without your consent, whether you wanted it to happen or not. The age of consent in Ireland is 17, and that's our cut-off point between adult and childhood experiences in the survey. So when I'm describing data for sexual violence experiences as an adult, that is incorporating a time period from when the person was age 17 and onwards, and for childhood experiences it's from earliest memory up until 16 or up until the 17th birthday. So I just want to outline the sexual violence as an adult definition. So it's defined as a range of non-consensual experiences, from non-consensual sexual touching to non-consensual sexual intercourse, and this is based on both national and international research. So violence is sometimes associated with the use of force, but can also mean having a marked or powerful effect on someone. And the types of experiences this would include is a person's genitals being touched when they didn't want them to be touched, a person being threatened in order to have intercourse with them, or someone who had sexual intercourse while they were asleep. So this covers a wide range of experiences. I also just want to outline the non-consensual sexual intercourse definition. So this is where a person has ever experienced, as an adult, another person who coerced, threatened, or forced the respondent in order to make them have sexual intercourse without their consent, or whether they had sexual intercourse with the respondent when the respondent could not give consent or stop what was happening because the respondent was asleep, passed out, or under the influence of alcohol and/or drugs. And just to outline that this variable is based on the concept of consent, which underpins the criminal legislation on rape and sexual assault. However, we've used the wording non-consensual sexual intercourse as this is how the variable was collected, and it's very important for us as part of this survey to ensure that respondents who have shared this sensitive information with us can see their own experiences reflected back to them. So we've used the terminology non-consensual sexual intercourse. We have further information on the methodology of the survey provided online, and I've a link included here. And you can find additional information on the development of the survey, the testing, how the survey was conducted, all included within that webinar. We also have our first publication, the main results, which we published last month, and I have a link there as well if you'd like to look at that information provided within there. So just to touch on the main results which were published last month, so 26% of adults, so persons aged 18 and over in Ireland, have experienced sexual violence as an adult. And this is the cohort that we're focusing on for this publication. Some other themes that we saw in the main results were that females were more likely to experience sexual violence than males. And we can see that also from the main results, where we can see that 12% of males had experienced sexual violence as an adult, compared with 39% of females. Other themes from main results included that there was an age difference where younger people were more likely to report sexual violence rather than older people, that females were more likely to disclose, and that most people know their perpetrator. So as I move into the discussion on this publication on adult experiences, I'm just sharing the infographic here. So we can see some of the key points that we're highlighting from this report, that 34% of adults with a third level education reported experiencing sexual violence as an adult. 9% of adults who have experienced sexual violence as an adult experienced sexual violence in the last 12 months. 25% of women experienced sexual violence as an adult with a partner, and 30% of men who experienced sexual violence as an adult with a non-partner experienced it in a pub, club, or disco. This is not an exhaustive list of all the points within the publication, but just highlights some key areas that may be of interest. And in the following tables, I also haven't provided an exhaustive list of all the points, but I'm just touching on some areas that you might find interesting within the survey. So looking at the experience of sexual violence as an adult with the highest level of education attained, you can see a clear pattern. 6% of adults who have a primary or below primary level of education have experienced sexual violence as an adult, compared with 34% of those who have a third level education. And just to note that these demographic breakdowns that have been provided in the publication was based on information provided by the respondent at the point that the survey was collected. So they may not necessarily have had the same demographic profile when the sexual violence experience was experienced. So for example, they may have had a lower educational level when the experience occurred and may have gained a higher level of education following the experience. Looking at the experience of sexual violence as an adult by marital status, we see that 33% of those who indicated that they were single in the survey have experienced sexual violence as an adult, compared with 22% of those who indicated that they were married or in a civil partnership, compared with 32% of those who were widowed, and finishing off then with 14% of those who noted that they were divorced or legally separated. Looking at the experience of sexual violence as an adult by disability status, what we can see here is that 30% of those who indicated that they had a disability have experienced sexual violence as an adult. This compares with 25% of those who indicated that they did not have a disability who have experienced sexual violence as an adult. So looking at those who experienced sexual violence as an adult by the time when it occurred. So this is based on those who have indicated to us that they experienced sexual violence as an adult. What we can see here is that 12% of males who had experienced sexual violence as an adult experienced sexual violence in the last 12 months. 8% of females who had experienced sexual violence as an adult experienced sexual violence in the last 12 months. So overall, for the state level, 9% of adults have experienced sexual violence as an adult in the last 12 months. Looking now at the breakdown of whether it was with a partner or a non-partner, we're now looking at the experience of sexual violence with a partner broken down by sex. What we can see here is a clear difference between the male and female cohorts. So 6% of males in Ireland have experienced sexual violence with a partner, compared with 25% of females. Looking now at the breakdown of sexual violence experience with a partner by principal economic status, we can see differing levels of sexual violence experiences for these different cohorts. So looking at those who indicated that they were employed, 18% of people of those who are employed have experienced sexual violence as an adult. Looking at, I suppose, one of the lowest levels, which was those who indicated that they were retired in the survey, 6% of those who are retired have experienced sexual violence with a partner. Looking at one of the higher levels, for those who indicated that they were fulfilling domestic tasks and unable to work due to long-standing health difficulties or health problems, 23% of each of these cohorts have experienced sexual violence as an adult with a partner. Looking now at the types of non-consensual sexual violence experiences with a partner. So looking now at males, so what we can see here is that 2% of men in Ireland have experienced non-consensual sexual intercourse with a partner. We can see that 3% of males have experienced non-consensual attempted sexual intercourse, with the highest levels indicated under the non-consensual sexual touching at 4% of males in Ireland have experienced this type of experience with a partner. Looking then at women and their experiences, we're seeing a similar pattern in that non-consensual sexual touching is at a higher rate than the other types of sexual violence, but they're at a far greater level. So 13% of women in Ireland have experienced non-consensual sexual intercourse with a partner. 19% of women have experienced non-consensual sexual touching as an adult with a partner. So you can see very different levels between both the male and female experiences. However, the patterns do seem to be similar. Looking now at the occurrence of the experience of sexual violence as an adult with a partner. So what we can see here is where respondents were asked if they had experienced any type of sexual violence experience as an adult. We asked them whether they experienced it once or more than once. And just to outline that when the respondent says once, it can be both on one occasion or within one relationship. So what we can see here is that 45% of males who have experienced sexual violence as an adult with a partner indicated they experienced it once, compared with 41% of females. 45% of males who have experienced sexual violence as an adult with a partner experienced it more than once, compared with 54% of females. So what we're seeing here is that females are more likely to indicate that they have experienced this type of experience with a partner more than once. Looking now at the sex of the perpetrator. So this is after they indicated that they had experienced either once or more than once. We asked people to indicate the sex of the perpetrator. And if they indicated that this was one person, we asked them whether it was male or female. So in this, males indicated in the survey for those who'd experienced sexual violence as an adult with a partner that for 14% of cases it was male on male, and for 86% of cases it was female on male. So the perpetrator was female. But please remember that the levels between men and women is quite different in terms of overall prevalence levels. Looking at the experience of sexual violence as an adult for women, what we're seeing here is that for women who experience sexual violence as an adult with a partner, that the sex of the partner was, the vast majority of cases, was male. So 99% of those who had experienced sexual violence as an adult with a partner, it was male, compared with 1% that indicated that it was female perpetrator who had perpetrated this violence on them. Looking now at the experience of sexual violence with a non-partner by sex. So this is where we asked the respondent if they had experienced anything with someone who was a non-partner, and just to outline that for partner experiences, that's where it was someone that they were married to, living with, whether it was someone who was a boyfriend or girlfriend, or someone that they had, someone that they were dating, and it would include both current and ex-partners. Moving then to the non-partner section, it focuses then on people who we were never in an intimate personal relationship with. So looking at this, we're seeing a similar trend, that there is a greater difference between male and female experiences of sexual violence with a non-partner. So 9% of males in Ireland had experienced sexual violence as an adult with a non-partner, compared with 29% of females. Looking now at the experience of sexual violence with a non-partner by sexual orientation, we can see that 19% of those who indicated in the survey that they were heterosexual have experienced sexual violence with a non-partner, compared with 46% of those who indicated in the survey that they were bisexual. 30% of those who indicated that they were either gay or lesbian have experienced sexual violence with a non-partner. And for those who indicated that they were another category, including asexual, or whether they were questioning or unsure, for this category, 28% of those had indicated that they experienced sexual violence as an adult with a non-partner. Looking at the breakdown of the types of non-consensual sexual violence experiences by sex, we're looking now at the male picture. So for men in Ireland, for those aged 18 and over, 2% have experienced non-consensual sexual intercourse with a non-partner. You can see a similar pattern to the experiences indicated by with a partner, in that sexual touching is far greater than the other types of experiences. So 7% of men aged 18 and over have experienced non-consensual sexual touching with a non-partner. Looking at the experience of non-consensual sexual violence for females, what we're seeing here is that 10% of women aged 18 and over have experienced non-consensual sexual violence as an adult with a non-partner. Again, we're seeing far greater levels of non-consensual sexual touching, where 25% of women in Ireland have experienced this with a non-partner. And just to outline, for non-consensual sexual touching, this is where breasts or genitals were touched without the respondent's consent, or that they were made to touch someone else's breasts or genitals without their consent. So looking now at the occurrence of the experience, and just to outline that for these more detailed sections, this is based on either if it was one experience or more than one experience. It was experiences that affected the respondent the most. So looking at this, for those who had experienced sexual violence as an adult with a non-partner, 60% of those males experienced it once, and 32% of males experienced more than once. 50% of females who'd experienced sexual violence as an adult with a non-partner had experienced once, compared with 45% of those who'd experienced it more than once. So again, we're seeing a similar pattern as with partner experiences, that females indicate that they're more likely to experience it more than once. But please note that for these categories, once can mean both in terms of one occasion or also across one relationship. And by relationship, I mean with someone who is a non-partner, where it may be, for example, someone who is a person in authority or someone who is, a family member. Looking now at the sex of the person who did this to the respondent. So 47%, so this is looking solely at males. So 47% of males who indicated that they had experienced sexual violence as an adult with a non-partner had indicated that the sex of the perpetrator was male. 53% of those who experienced sexual violence as an adult with a non-partner indicated that the perpetrator was female. Looking now at females, and for those who had experienced sexual violence as an adult with a non-partner, 98% of females indicated that the perpetrator was male, compared with 2% who indicated that the perpetrator was female. So the majority of perpetrators for females was male at 98%. Looking now at the experience of sexual violence as an adult with a non-partner by the location of the experience. So this question, it was only asked of those in the non-partner section, not in the partner section, so just to be aware of that. And looking at this for males who had experienced sexual violence as an adult with a non-partner, we can see a variety of cases. And again, I'm just going to remind you that this was based, if they indicated that the experience was more than once, it would have been based on the experience that affected the respondent the most. So 30% of males have experienced sexual violence with a non-partner in a pub, club or disco. 6% of males have experienced non-partner sexual violence at a workplace, compared with 2% who indicated that they had experienced it in school or college. In terms of home places, 12% of males had experienced it at their own home, and 15% of males who'd experienced sexual violence as an adult with a non-partner had experienced it in another person's home. Looking now at the situation for women who had experienced sexual violence as an adult with a non-partner, we can see some similar trends. We can see that 26% of women have indicated that they experienced this in a pub, club or disco, which is similar to the male rates, which were also the highest for men. And also looking at the proportion for work and for school, 6% of females who'd experienced sexual violence as an adult with a non-partner indicated this happened at work or in a workplace, and 3% of females who had experienced sexual violence as an adult with a non-partner indicated this happened at school or in college. Interestingly, for females, we can see that 10% of them had indicated that this occurred at home, but 24% indicated that this occurred in another person's home. So a home place for females, whether it be in their own home or in another person's home, seems to be an area to be aware of, or that they're experiencing it at a higher level. So that's just a whistle-stop tour of some of the key points within the publication. There are several socio-demographic characteristics included within the overall prevalence levels, and I haven't detailed each one of them, but I've given you a flavour of what's included within the publication. So just looking ahead to what's coming up next after this publication, we will have a publication on childhood experiences, which we are expecting in June, and this will contain information on contact and non-contact experiences, and much like the adult publication, will have that additional demographic characteristics broken down for the overall levels. It'll also include kind of the occurrence of the experience, who was involved, the location, and the respondent's view on why it stopped. We'll then follow that with a publication on disclosure, so looking at adult and child experiences, so looking at who was told, how long they took to do so, the reasons why they disclosed or did not, whether the person told the Gardaí, and if they used any services. The next publication after that we're expecting in July, and it'll be focusing on harassment in one's daily life. So this will look at information on harassment that occurred in the last 12 months, and it'll detail the type of behaviour that was involved. It'll look at whether or not you told someone about it, who you told, and whether it happened once or more than once. And then finally, the last publication will look at attitudes, and we're expecting that at the end of July. And this information is only based on those who did not disclose sexual harassment or sexual violence experiences within the survey, just to be aware of that. So look at public opinion on so-called rape myths, the perception or frequency of sexual violence in the community as well. So just to again reiterate that thanks to all the respondents who've engaged with the survey. It was very sensitive, and we know that, and we appreciate the time it took you to actually complete this. There's been a lot of work in the CSO on this and across the system as well. In particularly, we got a lot of support from the Department of Justice, and we've also gotten some very strong support from the NGO service, support service community as well throughout the survey. So you can send me any questions you have. My details are here, and if you've been affected by any of the issues in this, you can contact the Rape Crisis 24-hour national helpline, and the number is provided there, or alternatively you can look at the Rape Crisis help.ie website, which will also provide you some additional information as well. Thank you.